Inferno in a royal household, the Great Fire of Windsor. Good afternoon. For the Queen, it's a home, a place of family memories.
For the world, it's a symbol of Britain, part of our national heritage. On Friday, a significant part was devastated by fire, a state banqueting hall reduced to smouldering embers. This evening, we'll witness how violently the fire took hold, how valiantly they fought to save national treasures, and we'll ask how will the damage be repaired and who will bear the cost.
We start, though, with this afternoon's news from Windsor. As Ken Andrew reports, there was a royal inspection.
Prince Edward arrived at Windsor Castle this lunchtime to see for himself the full extent of the damage. Reports indicate the stone fabric of the castle, walls up to 23 feet thick, are relatively undamaged. But the wooden ceilings and panelling which fueled the spectacular fire still smoulder.
There are certain areas of the building which are very dangerous because there's been many floors collapsed with severe timber collapsed and molten lead. That's a dangerous, precarious situation.
However, order is slowly being restored after the weekend's chaos. Throughout the days, soldiers who guard and protect the castle have been returning some of the priceless artefacts hurriedly removed from the scene. But royal watchers believe the calm of the Queen's favourite weekend retreat will not be restored so easily.
There are a number of apartments here which are away from where the fire was and pretty extensive, and they're pretty nice, and there's still a lot of very valuable paintings, Canalettos and Van Dycks and that sort of thing in it. But indeed, outside all the time will be workmen, and like any housewife, you know, workmen do get under your feet and they're a great irritant, so that will upset her.
The fire has also had a profound effect on the people of Windsor. The castle dominates the town. As a tourist attraction, it provides work for a lot of people here. On Friday, it was their castle in flames.
We came up on Friday night and saw the flames coming out. It just makes you feel physically sick.
We all feel that it's part of our home that's gone. This is ours as well as Her Majesty the Queen.
The job of repairing the castle will begin soon. Workman Dean Lansdale, the last one out on Friday, will put his memories behind him.
I think I was pulling paintings out for about 5 minutes myself, and then it just got too hot. The flames had then reached, you know, we were running right up to the flames, pulling out, and it got too hot, and then someone just said no more.
The tourists will still come to Gorb, but it will be some time before Windsor Castle looks her best again. Ken Andrew reporting from Windsor.
Last Friday, the day the castle burned, was the Queen's 45th wedding anniversary. She was expected at Windsor for the weekend, but was still at Buckingham Palace when her favourite home caught light. This is the story of the fire, told through news footage and through video shot by the fire brigade themselves.
The first shout, fire, echoes down the royal corridors shortly after 11:30 in the morning. Flames lick at curtains in the Queen's private chapel in the northeast wing. Tourists and day trippers quickly learn something is wrong.
On the walkie-talkies, somebody said, fire in St George's Hall.
Berkshire Fire Brigade is already putting a full-scale emergency plan into action. A call is logged at 11:37. But within minutes, a pall of smoke can be seen for miles around. Flames come shooting through the roof of St George's Hall, a room of priceless splendour and an historical venue for state banquets. The fire is spreading fast, devouring wooden panelling and roaring through the hall's false ceiling.
Well, there are many, many hidden avenues or hidden paths for a fire to travel, and if you take St George's Hall itself, it has a 6-foot false ceiling, and if you can imagine, there's a void therefore that runs the whole length of the hall, 6 feet deep, through which the fire could travel. Now there is no way that the fire brigade can actually get to that area to inject water in at an intermediate stage, so consequently to the naked eye, if you like, it would appear that the fire is at one end of the hall. But what's actually happened, it's entered this void and travelled along the void, and it's right along at the other end of the hall.
By now, the people of Windsor are gathering in disbelief. The magnitude of the disaster is becoming apparent. Then the first word that a member of the royal family is here.
The Buckingham Palace confirmed that he was here overnight. Prince Andrew was actually here this morning.
A clamour for more information, but everything gives way to the firefighters.
No, it's hard to say at the moment. You've got...
was not in a part of the castle that was attached to this. I was down in the mews. And then I came up to see if I could help, and yes, I could. Let's get as much as we possibly can out. There was no time to think of anything else.
It emerges that the prince is personally involved in a huge salvage operation. Human chains pass down priceless books, paintings and furniture. Masterpieces and national heirlooms litter the terraces and lawns. Castle staff, volunteers and the army tell stories of passing world-famous artefacts through their hands. They save millions of pounds worth.
It's Queen's furniture, boxes of jewellery, all sorts of things like that.
What sort of condition was everything in that you moved?
It was the stuff that we moved was perfectly all right because we were just moving it out of the rooms in case the fire spread into them rooms so it wouldn't destroy all that as well.
At one stage, it takes 43 soldiers to move one huge carpet. The Queen spends time at the scene. She's said to be devastated. The fire rages on. The courtyard looks like a battlefield. 35 appliances and more than 200 firefighters. 7 people will be hurt, although none of them seriously. The job remains hazardous.
Okay, we'll give it a go. Means that, does he?
Yes. From Mr. Ashfield, the RSV crew will be going up onto the roof to strip all the lead off it and to form a break, and you are going to put them on it. Over.
Yeah. Sucking air in, so there's something's going in there, isn't there? Yeah. We can't get to that, can we? No.
This is the northeast section of Windsor Castle ablaze. From the outbreak in the private chapel, the fire has spread south towards the Queen's apartments, north into Brunswick Tower and along the whole length of St George's Hall. The brigade's strategy is to create fire breaks at the Chester Tower and at the Clock Tower to hold the heat at bay.
At every floor level in the building, at those breaks, including on the roof and in the basement, we have had personnel deployed with hoses, with ample water to make sure that we can stop the fire at that point. It's extremely dangerous because the building itself, of course, being an old building, is very complicated. It's not like a new house. There are lots of passageways and obviously in a fire condition. It is very easy to get disorientated, and in fact some of you were here earlier when we had to evacuate the building on 2 occasions because we in fact failed to locate 4 members of our crews, and we had to evacuate the building and satisfy ourselves that they were safe.
Firefighter Johns of the Bucks Fire Brigade, report to the control unit.
The fire is prevented from spreading wider, but throughout the evening the Queen's home lights up the sky. The Brunswick Tower, the Chester Tower, St George's Hall, the private chapel, the Star Chamber and the green and crimson drawing rooms, all gutted. As they wait into the evening, locals speak of their feelings.
I'm absolutely devastated. I love the royal family. I love Windsor. I live here because I love Windsor. It's my home. This is my home too. I think everybody's just shocked.
Such history behind the town and this to happen. Sheer shock is me.
It's quite a historical moment, really, seeing Windsor Castle catching fire like this.
But because the Great Fire has burnt for so long, Some wonder why it hasn't been brought under control earlier. The man in charge is emphatic.
We responded with a lot of people, a lot of machines in a very short space of time, so we are very confident that we've done all that we can, and we're very pleased and satisfied that we've managed to prevent it from actually spreading further into the rest of the building.
I don't think that necessarily it's taken a long time to get it under control. The facts are that in a building of this age, there are a lot of dead spaces in which people don't actually normally live or work. Voids in the roof and places like that, where it's very easy for fire to get in. It's also mostly wooden, so it's going to burn.
So will you tell us how you feel about this?
Very sad and devastated.
As Saturday morning dawns, the full extent of the damage is clear.
The Great Fire of Windsor, a national disaster that for once had no human casualties. But what is the loss to Britain's heritage? Can the castle be restored, and who foots the bill? After the break, I'll be talking to Lord St John of Fawsley, an expert on the royal collection.
And I'll be hearing from one of the people closest to the Queen at Windsor, her personal chaplain. Join us after the break. The fire at Windsor Castle caused shockwaves through Britain and beyond. Almost immediately, news of the devastation was being reported worldwide.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin overseas tonight, where a considerable portion of the world's oldest and largest castle in which someone lives has been very badly damaged by fire. It is Windsor Castle.
Today at Windsor Castle, there is relief that the damage to works of art wasn't greater, but the structural damage to the castle was massive.
Investigators say that workmen discovered the fire in a private chapel, and the flames then quickly spread to several more adjacent rooms.
This was the grand reception room, renowned for its 18th century tapestries, its intricate gilt plasterwork, a huge malachite vase. This is the grand reception room now, a smoldering ruin, although the tapestries may have been saved. St. George's Hall, the state banquet room, was built in the 1300s. Here the Queen entertained presidents, Lech Walesa, Mikhail Gorbachev, Ronald Reagan. This is St. George's Hall now, totally destroyed, its roof collapsed into a heap of charred timbers, water-soaked and somber. This was the kitchen before the fire, and the kitchen on fire.
A financial and cultural disaster of historic proportion. Ron Allen, ABC News, Windsor.
However big the news in America, nowhere was it felt more keenly than in the town of Windsor itself, as we've already seen in our films this evening. Earlier this afternoon, I listened to a personal view from the Queen's private chaplain at Windsor.
My wife and I spent something like 9 hours altogether. We popped home occasionally to get something to eat or drink.
What did you actually have to do that afternoon once you had the call?
Oh, a wonderful mixture of jobs. The first thing was to help carry some very fascinating small objects, but very precious, like miniatures, wonderful miniatures. I was then bringing out books and files and papers, which ran from anything like little sort of pocketbook size, but lovely little treasure of a volume, to huge folders of plans and things like this. You could hardly, portfolios, and several big volumes like St John Hope's History of the Castle in 2 or 3 volumes, that sort of thing.
What was the general spirit amongst the staff while all this was going on?
Quite wonderful. Like wartime, when you're really up against it, when the nation was up against bombing. I mean, it really was rather like this. The national heritage was a danger, or part of it, and these wonderful ranges of buildings.
You've actually been back and stood in the ruins. How did you feel?
Well, first of all, the actual seat of the fire you can hardly go into now because it's not safe. But of course, I've peered in and I have been to look in rooms like St George's Hall, which are, of course, a very sad shadow of their former self. Now, the good thing is we know these can actually be restored so that nobody really could tell the difference in due course.
How do you think the Queen is going to respond?
Well, knowing her, I'm sure she will triumph over everything. She'll come through it. And we know that the rooms will recover, they will be restored. But they must be immeasurably sad, and yet, as usual, they are bearing it with great dignity.
And it's, after all, been a particularly difficult year for them, hasn't it?
Firefighters will be at Windsor for some days, ensuring that the castle is completely safe. But already experts have moved in to work out what needs to be done to restore the castle and the works of art it contains to their former glory. The most important question to be considered now is how much restoration will cost and who will pay for it. Responsibility for the castle itself is quite clear. The government pays over 20 million each year for the upkeep of royal castles and has already agreed to bear the cost of damage to Windsor's structure, estimated to be up to 100 million. Ironically, 4 years' worth of refurbishment work at the Windsor, costing £20 million, went up in smoke on Friday. However, the position on the furnishings in the castle and the works of art is much less clear. Since the death of the first Windsor, Queen Victoria, in 1901, every monarch has bequeathed the important works of art to the nation. The Royal Collection at Windsor includes everything from sculptures and furniture to rare books, hundreds of old masters and over 20,000 drawings, including half of those carried out by Leonardo da Vinci. Royal author Andrew Morton has estimated the value of the Royal Collection at £9 billion, and the bulk of the collection is at Windsor. The surveyor of the Queen's pictures, Christopher Lloyd, said on Channel 4 recently, the Royal Collection is a private collection. If that's the case, then it's the Queen who should bear the cost of restoring any damaged works of art or furnishings. All of these works are insured against damage, but not against fire. The bill could run into millions. But the fire raises another crucial question. Windsor is a royal residence. Security and other restrictions mean that little of the collection has been truly available to be seen by the public. Just enough is exhibited to raise money for routine cleaning and conservation. For all practical purposes, the collection belongs to the Queen, not to the nation. So should the taxpayer foot the bill for its restoration? The organisation charged with advising the nation on such matters is the Royal Fine Art Commission. Its chairman, Lord St John of Fawsley, is a former Minister for the Arts, and he's with me now. Lord St John, who should pay for the restoration of the works of art at Windsor Castle?
The nation should pay through the Department of National Heritage, because these pictures, although in name they belong to the Queen, in fact they belong to the nation. She couldn't possibly dispose of any of them. They are part of our heritage, and we now have a Department of National Heritage, and it is their responsibility to see both that the building is restored and that the paintings are repaired.
It is entirely true that the Queen cannot dispose of any of these works of art by tradition and by understanding, and of course everyone is sympathetic to the royal family, but it is also true that very little of this collection is available for the nation to view it at any particular time. For all practical purposes, it does actually belong to the Queen.
I don't think it's true that very little of the collection is available to be seen. Those state rooms are open to the public. Some of the greatest pictures in the country are there. If you take the triptych of Charles I by Van Dyck, the Van Dyck of the children of Charles I, the Canalettos, the great views of the Thames, the Holbeins, and the Leonardo drawings from time to time. So there's no question that people do have access to this collection, though naturally they can't have access to all of it all the time.
In your view, isn't there some case for some of the restoration to be met by the royal family? They occupy the castle, they essentially have control over the works of art. We could argue about how much the public can see, but they have control over it. Isn't there a case for them meeting at least some of the cost?
Well, I think that is a matter for the Queen and her advisors to decide. But the restoration costs of these pictures is likely to be very expensive. And as I say, they are pictures that belong to the nation. I think everyone accepts that. But of course, if Her Majesty wishes to make a contribution to it, that's a matter that's up to her decision.
I know this is your advice is private, but let's say you were advising her. Would you say to her that that is something that at least she should consider?
I think if I were advising her, I would advise her to get the Department of the Environment and the Department of National Heritage to look at all the fire precautions and all the wiring and all the accesses to the castle and the other palaces and make sure they were working properly and right up to date, because we have had 2 warnings, one at Hampton Court, serious, and the second warning, very serious indeed.
Lord St John, it obviously has been a turbulent year for the royal family, and we know that their public image has suffered to some extent. But in the past 2 days, we've seen a new side of Prince Andrew with his off-the-cuff press briefings on the lawn, and few people could fail to have been touched by the concern shown by the Queen over the last couple of days. Might this weekend perhaps restore some of the public's esteem and affection for the royal family?
I think you're certainly right. That we have had an opportunity of seeing somebody like Prince Andrew as he is, instead of the caricature we see through the tabloid press. I think that people have realized over this burning of the castle how very important our history is to us, how that history is woven into the history of the royal family, and how the royal family in the end is human. Here was a lady seeing her home being burnt down.
Thank you very much, Lord St John.
And there we end our special programme on the fire at Windsor Castle.
And we leave you with these pictures of the blaze that saddened the nation.